So hi everyone, and thank you for attending and for all your interest in this research about autonomous vehicles that we are conducting at the University of Toronto. So my name is Lisa, and I am a postdoctoral fellow at the Mobility Network, and we are trying to work to understand what are the impacts of having zero automated vehicles in the city of Toronto. Uh, Let me tell you a little bit more about the motivation behind this project. So starting with the introduction of services like Uber and Lyft, new mobility services, they seem to add congestion to some of the to some of the cities around the world, according to the studies. So similar outcomes are expected when automated vehicles are deployed in our cities. There have also been some studies, more of naturalistic experiments, where, for example, a chauffeur is assigned to a person, and that happened in a study where 13 participants got a chauffeur, and they were using that vehicle as a proxy of an autonomous vehicle, and that revealed that the trips or the miles traveled, the kilometers traveled from those people increased by 21%. And most of those trips were done without the person in the vehicle, the person who was responsible for the vehicle. So we know from past experiences from the deployment of older technologies in the car itself that the deployment, usability, operability, and in general the success of a technology such as autonomous vehicles depend largely on the municipal, provincial, and federal regulations that are imposed toward that technology. So for this specific study, it was key to understand the vision of some of the stakeholders, and that it's to prepare better regulations. And this is because some of those technologies usually don't bring favorable social outcomes, and we really wanted to see if that would be true for zero automated vehicles in the city of Toronto. So in 2019, the Toronto City Council approved a document that is like a roadmap for how autonomous vehicles are going to be deployed, which is called the Automated Vehicles Tactical Plan. And that plan outlined a vision that was funded mainly on 7 directions. So some of them are equity, environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, privacy, road safety and security, integrated mobility, and transportation system efficiency. And in that last one of the things that they identify is that potential of having vehicles without occupants roaming around the city of Toronto, the roads of the city of Toronto. So we were tasked with this research and really trying to understand and study those potential impacts associated with zero occupant vehicles in the city. So the overall goal of this project that I'm going to give you just a snack peek today, it's understand the potential impacts of zero occupant vehicles, how they will operate, and how they will impact things like congestion and pollution and parking, among other issues that I will get to share a little bit about those with you today. So first of all, let me explain you for us and for this study what were zero occupant automated vehicles, and some people call them trips, some people call them miles. For Canada will be kilometers. So what are those ZOVs, as we call them? So before going into that detail, I wanted to put everyone in the same page on what an automated vehicle is. So for that, I am using the Society of American Engineers classification, where they have in 6 levels, level 0, 1, and 2. There are some features that are automated in the car, things like cruise control, for example, or adaptive cruise control, But in these three levels, mainly the human is in control of the car. But when we move to the ladder, we start to see some other features of automation that allow the driver to sit back and kind of relax um, on the main task that it should be doing in the car. So in conditional automation, the vehicle can control most of the driving tasks, but at some points, a driver override is required. Then we go to level 4, which is high automation. And in this stage, the vehicle performs all driving tasks, but only under certain conditions. So if there is a snowstorm, for example, the car cannot uh, uh, do the drive by itself, so the person will need to take over. But in level 5, which is known as a full automation, the vehicle will be able to perform all driving tasks under all conditions. And at this point, it's expected that these vehicles won't have a steering wheel or any pedals on them. So these three later levels are those where mainly the machine is in control. For this study, we mainly focus on those impacts that will be bring to the city when level 4 and 5 are available in the roads of Toronto. Any additional information for you to take into account, it's that we consider that automated vehicles, or AVs, are likely to be privately owned, meaning each of you can own one of these cars that are level 4 or 5 and send them to run your errands, or they can be shared automated vehicles, meaning a similar operation as what we see nowadays with Uber and Lyft. Autonomous vehicles are expected to be electric vehicles, but one thing doesn't necessarily mean the other. There are most of the technology is advancing to be electric, but some cars are still powered by fuel. And electric vehicles are partially or fully powered by electricity. When we talk about share automated vehicles, I mentioned this will be likely to operate as ride-hailing or as a pool service where two riders or more are paired to use the same vehicle. And when talking about autonomous vehicles, there are mainly two types of trips that can be done in an AV. One, it's when the AV is occupied by someone, so we will call them passenger hailing trips. And then the other ones are the ones that are important for this study, which are zero occupant vehicle travel, or ZOVs. So I will provide you two examples of what a ZOV means. So let's say we have an autonomous vehicle which is level 4 or 5. It can drive itself for most of the time. It's at the parking lot and it logs in to be able to be called to be used. So the vehicle is waiting to be hired, and then it starts cruising for a ride around the area where it is until a ride gets requested and assigned to that specific vehicle. And then it's en route to get to the passenger. Then it picks up the passenger. And after it picks up the passenger, it takes the passenger from its origin to its destination until their drop off. And at this point, this cycle can repeat. And the car again will be waiting to be hired, cruising for a ride, and so on. Or at the end of the day, the car will go back to the parking and log out to get maintenance and cleaning and all the necessary stuff that will need to be done at that point. So from this specific example, those zero occupant vehicle trips are those happening between point B and D and between point E and F. The others are understood as to be autonomous vehicle trips with passengers. But when we think about occupancy, we are also thinking about cargo and other potential things that the car could be carrying in the moment that it is used. So I am also presenting here an example for urban freight, but there can be many more examples when we have ZOVs. It's just that we have a short time and I'm presenting just two. So in this specific example, we have a level 4 vehicle. Again, it's at the parking lot And let's say the parking lot is at the same point as a distribution center. So the car gets filled up with a lot of cargo, and it starts the revenue miles to get to distribute that cargo to different places. Since it's an urban freight example, that can happen n number of times until the car is empty, at which point it could go back to the initial distribution center, or could do some empty miles, again, some ZOV miles, and go to another distribution center. And if the system is very efficient, this example can repeat throughout the day until the end of the day or the period where the car is used to get maintenance and cleanance again at the parking lot. So from this specific example, those zero occupant vehicle trips are those happening between D and E, between D and B, and between E and F. So there are some impacts that this technology could have in the city. So some of the impacts that you could tell from the motivation of the study is that harmful roaming or the congestion that they could bring to the city that is already a little bit congested, especially in the downtown area. There are also some impacts that will have an implications in broader range of users, such as infrastructure overuse or payment deterioration, given the tier and wear of the cars. There are also potential additional emissions from the roaming of the cars around the city. And there are also concerns about safety and privacy concerns and liability on who will be at fault if a car without nobody at the wheel will collide with something. So for that, and knowing all that information, we plan a stakeholder engagement to, again, understand the impacts from different perspectives. And I want to tell you a little bit more about that. We had a data collection, and we did some focus groups with people from nonprofit organizations, the government, consultant, academics, and also we did some one-on-one interviews with auto industry and tech industry representatives to understand how they perceive this, if they either perceive it as a problem, and if they were working towards mitigating the potential impacts of this problem. So these are some of the people that I had the pleasure to interview and be part of the focus group. At the end, we collected information from 43 different participants. So as you can see from this quick sample, we had people in consulting, but also the TTC, Walk Toronto, Cycle Toronto, which are more of an active travel nonprofit organizations being part of the study. So as I mentioned, we did some focus groups and interviews, and in those, we had like a part of introductions, then I kind of measured their attitudes towards the technology, and then we start to talk about the ZOV concerns and the strategies to mitigate the impacts. So I really wanted to hear from, because I know this presentation was more to kind of like afterwards chat about your thoughts. So I really want to discuss mainly those potential concerns that the people in the room have about ZOVs and those potential impacts to mitigate. But I will give you a sneak peek of what is people saying so far. So you can give me also your thoughts along the lines. So a lot of the people that I interviewed point out the need to start setting standards for the cars, and especially things like proprietary information, because we don't know really how the cars are working. This is very private information from the manufacturers. So to kind of plan, we really need to understand how they are working in the background. One of the most controversial issues in the questions was liability, and again, that sense of who will take the responsibility in the case of a collision. So some participants argue that original equipment manufacturers should be held accountable, while others think we should keep using the current system that we have in Ontario. But something that was very interesting for me was that many respondents, even those working in the industry, point out the need to prepare the city for more active travel and keep preparing it around mass transportation as the backbone of really Toronto, the operation of the transportation system in Toronto, which is really, I would say, hopeful for me to know that we are not thinking this technology as something that will come again and try to take over the already built transit system that we have. And with that, I want to conclude, and the next slides that I have are more like kind of questions. So if everyone has any questions, I am open to that right now.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's really great to hear about your research. It's a really relevant topic, for the month, and one that, I think is even just, I think we know this, but just seeing your presentation, it's one that we have to start thinking about now, right? Because like so much technology, if we don't, think about how it will impact us before it's impacted us, and sometimes can be difficult to mitigate those impacts. So we've got about 8 minutes for Q&A. We like to kind of alternate between the folks online and the folks in the room. Do we want to get the shared view back up here? Yes. And maybe we'll start online. So just like before, feel free if you've got a question for Lisa and you're joining us virtually, just put a Q in the chat. Sam, I'll ask you to call on the first person, and then we'll switch to one in the room.
We don't have any in the chat yet, so.
Okay, is there, well, anyone in the room have a question or comment for Lisa? Go for it.
Are there any plans of these being rolled out, and like what the timeline of that would look like?
Yeah.
Did you get that? So questions about timeline. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, so there is so I talk about the different levels, right? And for example, we have right now a car, which is Canada is testing a car which is level 4. So I don't know if from the respondents you saw that company that's called Gatic. So they are doing meter mile delivery on a car that's already doesn't have any driver on the seat controlling the car. So we have started to see more and more kind of from the commercial side of the technology, cars already out there. But as to the ones that will be personally owned, a lot of people mention 10 years, but I'm really skeptical about Canada being ready in 10 years for something like that. So I will say 20 years will be more of a realistic timeline to see them even more and more as a private owned. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any questions in the online? We've got another question in the room.
Yeah, we have one. Got one from Brian.
Hi, really interesting talk and an interesting topic for sure. I have a couple of questions. Is this like an ongoing study that you're doing, or is it already published? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we actually finished the data collection on November 14th. So I am still analyzing and learning from the data, and this is just one part of the study. So in the second part, we will so this is more of a quantitative part where we really go into asking the different stakeholders their vision and their understanding of the problem. But then we will have a second part of the study where we are more quantifying really these impacts of having zero occupant vehicles. So really giving you numbers on how much emissions we think they are going to produce, or how much congestion and things like that. So this study is expected to be released, or the results of what I'm doing right now is expected to be released next March, and it will be available in the city website. But then the more of the quantitative one is expected by December of next year.
Interesting. Cool. Thanks. And I just had one point of clarification about that. The last bullet point on the slide there. what exactly do you mean by the need to prepare the city for more active travel?
Yeah, so a lot of people, and especially I heard throughout the interviews and the focus groups, complaints about the infrastructure for active travel, mainly in the winter. And a lot of people who has mobility impairments, that's one of the biggest challenges that I was hearing from those that I interviewed. So a lot of people have very like unique ideas about using more of this technology or automated technology to help cleaning sidewalks so people could walk, or cleaning the bike trails so that people could use them to connect to their places of work. So there are a lot of things that the city could still do to kind of motivate more active travels, that right now we might not look in that as a priority, but people mentioned it should be one of the priorities of the city.
Awesome.
So I think we've got another question in the room. Alex, was it? Yeah.
I'm curious if you had any discussion around, like, I remember in Toronto briefly, there were those really small delivery robots, right? I don't know if they were actually autonomous or not, but I was wondering if you had any discussion around the sort of non-standard vehicles that don't fit into what we already use.
Yeah. So I had two people that was part of the focus group. One were more looking at those robots that I mentioned, the sidewalk cleaning ones, knowing folks. And then I had another one who was more looking at those small vehicles for delivering goods are called in transportation first and last mile delivery. So we also had a company that was working on the deployment of those ones, and they are really interested in how they can, of course, give their services to the city and how that it's going to facilitate. I think Toronto has been very cautious about what technologies they are allowing to try on in the city, and I think until we don't understand the technology that much, I think it's safe to kind of move that way. But for sure, for the tech company, that doesn't look good, right? So I heard a lot of complaints that we should prioritize more of the technology, or letting the technology to try out in the roads of the city. But I personally, and this is my personal opinion about that, and it's not, I don't represent the city at any point in what I'm going to say, but I think we should understand more the technology before we let it to populate the roads.
I think maybe we got time for one more. Is there another queue there, Sam?
There is from Rye.
Hi, I was thinking, in the next phase of your study, are you planning on looking at the personal financial impacts of this, such as we saw when like Uber and Lyft proliferated? It created a very negative impact for people who had existing licenses to drive for a profit.
We are not really, we are in all honesty, we are not considering that, but I know different other researchers at the University of Toronto are more looking at the impacts of you gave us the example of for instance, taxi drivers when Uber and Lyft started to enter to the market, but what is happening also now with automated trucks is that truck drivers will also suffer from, or will there will be a cutback on those kind of professions. And so I know, like, our study won't look directly into that, but there are other researchers at the university that I know are focusing more on those like social and economic impacts that the technology will bring.
All right, thank you, Lisa, and thank you to everyone who asked questions. I'm sure there might be some more, so Lisa has graciously agreed to stick around and run a further breakout conversation. I also believe you have some questions for us, right, Lisa?
Yeah, yeah. So
so-
I also wanted you to be part of the discussion. So if you
Yeah,
have
so-
any ideas, I have some questions prepared as well.